All right. Got a weird setup here. Um, yes, and I one thing I have to make sure of is that I know to that this will be watched later. Like I've sometimes had lulls in it, but I don't know. I don't know if I announced this the right way. It's amazing. I've used YouTube for as long as I have, yet have not explored everything. So I just made a post about this, but I don't know, maybe a short would be better to let people know. But then again, also chose a weird time. I have a very weird schedule. So, all right, first one in though. Ron Bunn says, "Yo, what up, Ron?" Um, I know I still have to figure out all the chat options and stuff too, but um, I guess I'll give it like I don't know, maybe another minute. I don't know, but there's a lot I want to cover. I actually I was thinking about doing these more and more often because um, sometimes when I talk on some things, I want to go a little bit further in depth with them, but then also get maybe even live feedback. Because sometimes I'll make some videos and be like, not just if anyone will get this, like, does anyone know what I'm talking about? But if they're just like, whoa, 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 what are you even saying, dude? That's not right. But it's not that just whatever you guys say will dictate how I think. But there's a lot of things just throughout more people I met, more people that have done this, who have been through all sorts of different types of experiences. I meet more and more what I call unicorns, where unicorns are people I refer to where it's like this the sort of person who could drink alcoholically for like 5 years and then just actually put it down by themselves. I know a few people like that, and I think knowing them almost makes it worse sometimes because you then aspire to be that person, and to be able to do that. But just different types of circumstances and a lot of things that I never knew before. Like one thing that I've learned over the years, with meeting more people in recovery for meth, is that where my shout out to all my tweakers out there, but the way you can actually function on it, and this is not an advertisement or a plug for methamphetamines, but I didn't realize the way that some people can just function on it for a long time. Now obviously, some people kind of go to crazy town right away. Depends on the trajectory of your use and anything. But there's people that, especially the times when I go to treatment, and they're going to treatment for the first time, and they're like 50, and they've been like running their own business for 20 years. And a huge part of it was that it finally got bad enough to where they had to stop. But I mean, if you think about it, addiction is addiction, but there is little different aspects to it. And you can imagine that if your drug of choice happens to give you energy, is that floating in the? Okay, never mind. You have to imagine if your drug of choice is giving you energy as one of the side effects or one of the purposes, that would be a little bit more useful than maybe shooting up fentanyl or something. But I met a lot of people like that where I was like, there's no way there could be a high functioning like addict of that sort, like that was doing it every day and going crazy with it. But apparently there is. Let's see here. Okay, so Ron, my friend is trying to do it cold turkey, but is struggling in a major way. Also telling himself he can tone it down to one drink a day. Man, I know about that sort of scenario because one thing is doing it cold turkey. I don't even know where the phrase cold turkey exactly comes from. Maybe that's just what describes what your skin feels like when you're going through withdrawals. But one, it's difficult. Like there was times I had to go to treatment because maybe I could go through the detox. I could go through the withdrawals, maybe get a little bit crazy with the delirium tremens on the couch, but it wasn't so much about just gritting through that because there's times I could be so sick. I'm like, I don't even want to drink because I don't want to move. But it is when you're in that hyper vulnerable place, like right after, like the few days after, when you actually start to get like you start to feel a little better. And there was times where, as crazy as it sounds, I was thinking like, I now that I feel great, I could get a good drunk on now. But you start feeling better, and then all that you start making new plans, and it sounds kind of like what your friend is, tone it down to one drink a day. Now, I don't know if that is one drink a day because it into like a step down process or something, or if it's literally one drink a day where that's how he wants to or she wants to drink from now on. But it's one thing I always come back to where as for most alcoholics, if they truly are, they really don't want one drink. I don't know anybody. Like I always used to say this to where I would rather have no drinks than like four drinks, like four shots or beers, because it would only start revving up the engine and the craving to want more. Like I may already be craving with zero, but the getting some of it in my system would just be like terrible, because it starts it. And some people refer to it as like an allergic reaction, like a psychological one to alcohol, if the person is truly an alcoholic. But yeah, I mean, doing it, I don't know, one a day, because again, a big thing is that the reason why people's drinking spiral out of control is that it's not like just the frequency of drinking, where they just have a beer a lot of times, but they can space it out to where they don't get really drunk. But it is also, it's not that, it's liking the effect. Now, Ron, it's because he wants to be that kind of stable drinker, but he has no period of actually drinking like that. Pointed out how it's far more likely to make you want one more, or denials because he's new to rehab and admitting he's got the issue. Yeah, it is. There is like, and this is one thing I think about a lot with in some of the discrepancies between alcoholics and addicts, which I always say that, some people may say in their mind, well, I don't do opiates, or I don't do, cocaine or meth or any of this type of stuff. And no one recreational, maybe some people when you're young recreational does that, but like no one, it's not the same thing as having like a 6-pack after a hard day at work or over the weekend. And drinking is so ubiquitous that it's easy to kind of, like I always come back to, is like, no one's just like, well, I'm just a long day at the office, I'm going to come in and I'm just going to shoot up a little fentanyl for tonight and maybe do some binge on Netflix or something. I mean, that seems obvious in a lot of people's minds. Like, no, you can't do that. However, what I always say is that the alcohol is like fentanyl or meth or crack to you. If you were the alcoholic, it's really in a way just as bad, because you don't drink like the people you see the drinking around you. And that's, like I said, that's a trap that I know that's one of the biggest traps when I talk to a lot of people about relapse. Like when it comes to alcoholics, one of those big traps is, as you brought up, Ron, like it being in denial, or that's a possibility. That denial of, it's not a full-on denial. It's not saying I don't got anything wrong. Nothing's wrong with me. Everything's super peachy king and awesome. But it's saying that, okay, I could do this differently. And that is, I think in Alcoholics Anonymous, they say the great pursuit or some great desire, something like that, of every alcoholic is to drink like a normal person. But I always contended that the truth is that, I mean, you don't really actually want to drink normally, in a sense. Like the way I think about it is that the way I drink, I want to drink the way I drink, right? And I assume that maybe your friend wants to do the same way, because he said he's never had a period of drinking like that. So in a sense, you actually don't even truly, in the alcoholic's heart, they don't want to drink normally. They don't want to have like a couple of beers or a glass of wine, or just have a couple shots at the bar and then leave. They want to drink the way they drank. What they really want is to not have consequences. And so what they maybe will equate in their mind is like, well, if I drink less, that will equal less consequences. But maybe I'll still somehow get the benefits, so to speak, from drinking, the effect of intoxication. So it can't be that much, but I still want some of the relief, maybe some of the escape, maybe sometimes to hold back some of the emotions I don't like, or just a way to relax, or a way to enjoy things. I know that's a big thing with a lot of people, where it's the way they've learned how to have fun with things. And so what you try to equate it to is that, okay, if I just do less of that, I'm just going to do a little, it's just like anything. Like I've been having too much sugar recently. I'm just going to cut back on, the ice cream or the candy, and I'll just do less. I'll treat myself, right? I'll be able to treat myself every now and then, but I won't overdo it. However, that's not the way that alcoholism or addiction works. So if he's going back to it, because again, a lot of people, I mean, and you're right to point out that it's far, far, far more likely to make you want more and more. Because again, as you even stated, like he's never had a period of drinking like that. And that's one thing that you kind of have to ask, which is hard to, when you really, really want to drink. It's easy to fall into denial. It's easy. A lot of times it's not like these thoughts we have are actually really ingenious or convincing or a way to trick ourselves. It's just usually you'll believe a lot of stuff if you just really want to do it. And so the way I think about it is that if you can be honest with yourself, or maybe you can help the person be honest in some sort of situation, just be like, have you ever done that, man? Have you ever had like a substantial period where you drank like that? Because I would contend that if you had, that's the way you'd be drinking now. Like for me, it always came back to if I had a way that I was able to drink this way, like in a way without consequences, maybe even still a drinking problem, but not that bad. If I had a way I could use drugs recreationally, if I had a way I could do that, by God, I would be doing that by now. Like I wouldn't let it crash into this stuff. And that's one of those things that people, if they don't want to know it, if they don't want to know the truth, that's what can be so hard about telling yourself, no, I'm not going to be able to do it that way. I'm not going to be able to like dole this out. This isn't like some sort of way I can just temper it, because at the end of the day, what you're really saying is if it's going to be just one a day or just a few here and there, or you're going to drink normally, what you're actually saying is what I want to do is moderate. And I mean, I would just think addiction is anathema to moderation. Like it's almost, you could say, the disease of moderation, in that you can't do it. And that the person who thinks that they'll be able to think a way to do it, they'll create some sort of system. And again, as I kind of mentioned before, when I started this, like meeting more and more people, the different experiences some people have out there. I think sometimes, and again, I would contend that this is actually maybe a worse situation, although it may not initially seem like that, but some people actually can do this for a little bit. They can kind of downshift their gears into like a much more toned down sort of drinking, and they can actually kind of do the little bit, all right, I'm going to limit myself to just this much per day. But really, the way that usually turns out, and I've heard this story over and over and over again, is that it eventually is just not enough. And in fact, this usually happens when a person stops for a while and then they'll start again, and then maybe their tolerance reset a little bit, or what have you, or maybe they just have a little bit more will to not overdo it because something really bad just happened. But for the most part, maybe they can even do it for a little while. And I think that in some psychological level, sometimes people will do that. They'll be like, okay, I will moderate, to prove them to themselves that they can actually handle this, and then go back to the way that they want to drink. Because that's what I think it always comes back to is, again, I think most people that actually are alcoholics, they don't want to drink normally. They think they do, but they actually don't want that. And like I said, I would not want just having one beer a day. To me, that would seem just absolutely, I mean, I don't even know why I would do it. That's what a lot of alcoholics, it's funny that the insanity of alcoholism that is there, they look at other people like they're insane. Like, why would you leave a glass of beer or a glass of wine half drinking? Why would you do that? Like, why would you? You're just going to have one with this meal. Your tummy's going to be full. You're not even going to get a little buzz off of it. And that's like the hardest thing for, somebody with this issue to wrap their minds around, is that why would you not get some effect out of it? Why would you not do it for the effect? Like, right? Like, I guess some people could have like acquired taste of certain whiskeys or wines, or, ooh, this is the oaky notes on this Chardonnay, or that can't be right. But obviously didn't drink wine. But, like some taste of it. A cold beer is paired with this steak or something like that. But for the most part, it is just always about the effect that it produces. And you don't even really like the taste. Like there's, so it starts narrowing down the reasons of why you would actually drink. And so when I guess if I hit on this enough, but I mean, going back to what you brought out, I think you're right. Like, and it's good to point out that, have you actually ever done that? Like, that's something I would say, I try to be, it could be very vulnerable to the person, like actually admitting that they have this problem and whatnot. But that's a good thing to point out, though. You just be like, really kind of maybe reflect a little bit on your life. And again, sometimes this depends on how old they are, how long they've been drinking. But really think about this. How many times have you tested this hypothesis? How many times have you actually tried to do this thing? And how did it turn out? Right. In most people, like that's one of those things with people I met in rehab before, where, some of them, you're like, I don't know if I'm going to actually quit drinking for good. I'm just going to try to do this stuff. And it's just kind of like, I don't know, maybe you were forced to come to treatment, but man, if it got to this point, I think if you were able to, you would have pumped the brakes. And it's good. Yeah, Ron, you said that to him as gently as you could, because It is he kind of chuckled and acknowledged it. It is prob his alcoholism, just fantasizing about totally not quitting. Well, there you go. At least he does have some self-awareness. Um, yeah, you're right. Good and bad. I mean, awareness is good. I can tell you this from a personal level that awareness can only help you begin the journey. Awareness can only help you. Like, it's good to realize you have a problem. Although some people sometimes go back on it. They go, never mind. I overblew it, and I didn't. I was just like, I was frazzled. I didn't mean any of the stuff I said, but just having the awareness, though, it's what a lot of people bring up as the difference between admitting you're an alcoholic or an addict, or accepting that you are. The admitting part is being able to tell people, being able to just be like, yes, this is. I can't deny this anymore. I can't be this at odds with reality anymore. I should turn this a little bit. I can't be at this odds with reality anymore. So yeah, dude, obviously there's a problem here, but I've been to that stage before. And did that mean I stopped drinking then? No, because what people try, I mean, what I've heard is that what differentiates acceptance is that if you actually accepted that this is your reality and that you are an alcoholic, then that acceptance would mean, okay, we have to do something about it then. If you fully accepted it, you've embodied the whole idea that this is never going to work out. This is going to be just a disaster, no matter what. This is actively going to be worse for my life, no matter which way I try to do it. If you truly accept that, then you will inevitably come to the conclusion that, okay, I can't drink that. I really can't, because I can't now not understand what this will do. However, like I said, you can go, a good and a bad sign is a really good way to put it, because you can go back and forth on exactly what you want to do. And that's one thing, is that it's not just going back and forth on what your reality is. Although some people do, sometimes they revert back to denial or justifications or things like that. But sometimes they'll still admit they're an alcoholic. They'll still admit that they have a problem with drugs and they can't stop, once they start and all that type of stuff. But with the hem and haw, what they go back on is, am I actually going to do anything about it? Which I know, especially to the, non-alcoholics or addicts, sounds like such a crazy thing. That's why it has to look like madness sometimes, because it's like, wait, hold on. That you are this thing, this thing where you have this affliction where it's always going to be terrible, and it's going to, like, maybe your life won't just go into a giant tailspin, but it's going to be for the worse. And you're trying to decide whether you want to do it or not. But like I said earlier, it's one of those things where it doesn't take much. It really doesn't even take that much mental horsepower or cleverness to trick yourself into doing it still. Because you don't need that much when it's something that you really want to do. When you're really, really addicted. Like, I always had this with, in referring back to this situation, is that one thing people would always suggest is, like, you can make a pros and cons list, right? Like, you can just sit down and write out the pros and the cons. And sometimes that can be helpful for people. Like, actually sitting and writing, it makes you meditate on it more, it makes it more real. You stare at what you wrote down, and, like, this is like what it's doing to my family or my life. Like, it makes you maybe like grasp it more. But for me, honestly, when I would actually give that the whole college try, I would realize that writing down all these cons, all these significant ones too, like you could lose your job, your family could, you're getting to the point where they're going to disown you. If you lose your job, you're not going to have a place to live. If you, like, all these really, really bad things, but they would always lose to the pros list. And it shouldn't even be called a list, because the pros list had one thing. It had, I want to, which I know sounds incredibly selfish and stupid, because it kind of, that's what alcoholism and addiction can do to your mind. But that is, it's changing that want. So going back to, like, having the awareness of the problem, but what you're actually going to do about it. And of course, even if you don't want, you can do a thing that you don't want to do. In fact, that's a lot of times how you better yourself in life. You do things you do not want to do. Either where they make you uncomfortable, or they're very difficult, or you're just not very good at them. But what that is, and I think that goes into another good topic of the idea that some people just aren't ready to stop. And this is what I've gotten a lot of people's comments when they're talking about somebody in their life. Some of the emails and stuff. And again, I've seen this play out over and over again, and I've felt this myself, is that this idea that I just wasn't ready to quit. And it seems so insane because you're just like, how much more bad shit has to happen for you to be ready? Like, why aren't you ready? How could you not? I mean, really, how deep do we need to dig a hole here? Like, how far do you want to go? You can go all the way. And I mean, do you need to start having like irreversible stuff happen, like stuff that you can't ever go back and change or alleviate, like, certain health things, prison time or death, of course, always. But like, does it need to be those things? And that readiness, I don't know. Actually, I find this very fascinating because it's one of these things where I can't even really tell you the pattern of it. Like, there's so many times where there's a phrase that's used in a lot of like 12-step programs, recovery rooms, just recovery in general, where it is like, I was sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? And it's kind of this idea that, it wasn't, something didn't crash into my life again, or crash down rather, or something, I'm just was done with this shit. Like, I'm just done with doing this, the grind of it all, just the chores of like the sneaky, the lying, the having to try to keep track of lies. And unfortunately, I'm doing substances that makes me forget. So now it's on like the difficulty mode is like super hard. And just having also the just heavy blows to my self-esteem and self-worth, like deep stuff, and just carrying the shame. Like, dude, I'm just, you know what? Honestly, it's a good version of just like, fuck this. We are done here. No more. I'm turning off the TV show. We're not watching any more of this. I'm done. We're doing something new. And so I will hear people describe that all the time. But the one thing that I just find curious about it is that what was the catalyst for that? Because if you said it's just been the same stuff over and over again, and I understand the idea that sometimes you hit your exhaustion point and you get tired of something and you don't want to do it. But it's just always so fascinating to me. It's like, okay, but what is this catalyst? You've been doing this for years and years and years, and just one day you decided. I think it's kind of like amazing in some respects. This is what some people might classify as like a sort of spiritual experience or an awakening of some sort, of some huge revelation, which I always think is funny because it's a revelation of something you've already known. But the way it just comes to people. And I could say honestly, truly, for me, it's kind of the same thing happened. The thing that started my longest stint of sobriety that I had in my life wasn't some horrific crash and burn where I'm detoxing in a psych ward and going through withdrawals, but it wasn't going to treatment and going like getting that 30 days down and starting from there, just hopelessly unable to stop doing it. And so I had to go there. It wasn't really some sort of external intervention, like having to go to jail or anything. All these things I've done, by the way. I had a couple months and then I had a relapse. It wasn't great. It wasn't fun, but it was like for a weekend. And then I had to start work again. And I was like, oh my God, as we started the cycle again. But just something inside me, something indescribable and inherent in me was like, no, we're not. Don't get me wrong. I still really wanted to drink. All the days afterwards, absolutely did. But something in me was like, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore, man. Like this sucks. And it was one of like my lesser sort of relapses later in life. But I kind of carried that momentum, and then I went on from there. And then there's been times like all the other stuff I mentioned, all the bad stuff happening. Like again, going through withdrawals of methadone and alcohol in a psych ward, have done that. Going through alcohol withdrawals in jail, going to treatment, all that stuff, and not feeling nearly as ready. And it's funny this time around, like to give sort of a life update or something. Is this time around in this journey of sobriety, hopefully the last one, and I do mean that, but this time around, I'll be honest, I did not have that readiness. I did not really actually want to stop. I mean, in the sense, of course, I wanted to stop. Like, I can't keep doing this. And I don't want my life to just keep spiraling out of control and getting to this level and all this type of stuff. Like, I can't, but I was, a part of me was just like, all right, well, I don't know what it is, but man, we got to learn to be tired. Like, if you don't feel it right now, dude, I don't know what to tell you. Like we just have to learn then we have to find a way to be tired, and we just have to stick it through. You hear slogans like this, like fake till you make it or something like that, or walk, act as if or something. And I was just like, okay, that's what we're gonna do, because I just don't want to do this anymore. I don't know what's wrong with my mind, or I don't know what's wrong with my brain at this moment, why it does not, again, not just want to stop, but why it doesn't feel willing. That's like really like the biggest key, is like why it doesn't feel like willing at all. And I couldn't tell you why I didn't feel that way, but what I could tell you was that I had to stop it. Sorry, I do have to answer this. Like, not a phone call, just one quick thing. Okay, anyways, sorry, but yeah, I realized, I was like, okay, then what we're gonna have to do, if even if you're not ready to stop, even if you don't want to, we gotta just stick through it, and then you'll like maybe you'll become ready, and maybe you'll feel it, maybe just again that positive, building positive momentum. And that's that was one thing that I, in a cycle throughout my life, where what was so difficult was that for so long I kept, as I always say, I kept doing the hard part over and over again. Kind of crashing and burning in some sort of way, like going through the detox and the withdrawals. And then those first couple of days out, how hectic and vulnerable those feel. And the first couple of weeks out, and where you have like some immediate, like heavy post-acute withdrawals, which sounds funny, like some immediate post-acute withdrawals. But the symptoms that are, when you get past like the sort of health phase of it, so to speak, like just getting past that, some immediate, like big time, like like psychological triggers and cravings can come at any moment. And it really like God, it feels like it sucks and you don't know what to do. But like for me, I thought to myself, I just could not figure out why I kept going back. I was like, dude, we're doing the hard part over and over again. Like we're going through this first month or two or a couple of months, and then we start back again. Because one of the things is that it gets easier over time. Like one thing I do say a lot is that at times, you can fall, you can be a couple months down the road, even sometimes even past a year with post-acute withdrawal symptoms. And then it can feel like you're back on like week 2. Like it could feel like that you're back, like, oh my gosh, I've gotten to this place now where I feel like I just quit a while ago and I'm so vulnerable and stuff. But then you can fall out of that, and those get fewer and like farther in between. And you really can start to, like, it does get easier, but falling into that trap of continually having a couple of weeks or a couple of months and then going right back at it, it sucks, because like you like I said, you're just doing the hard part over and over again. And so like let's see here. And by the way, send in anything. I'm trying not to, I'm not going to ramble or anything. I do have things that I do want to talk and go into detail, but I will stop doing that just for any sort of question that comes at it. So nobody, moderation was the hard part for me. Seemed like it was always going to be hard for me. I agree that sobriety gets easier. Yeah. Moderation, that is the hard part. Like that is, I mean, I don't know what, you would define addiction in a more vague, broad sense, not like the actual breaking down the details of it, but like the way I always think of it is the inability to moderate. Like it's truly just like as simple as that. You can't moderate when it comes to chemicals, or like you think about addiction for anything else, like process addictions and stuff, whether it's gambling, sex, or porn, or eating, or things like that. It is that's why some of those processed ones are, man, they seem difficult. Like ones that like involve stuff that you actually, it's fine for you to continue to do, or you have to do, like eat, or sex and everything like that. Like you have to dip your toe back into it. I mean, what was I just saying earlier about like how it's not a good idea to have one beer, but in some of those process addictions, like, well, I actually kind of have to do this type of stuff. But that is the thing, though. Whatever the substance is or whatever the behavior it is, the addiction is just like, no, there is no moderating with this. Like, this is not, it doesn't work that way. Like, all the ways that it works differently in your brain, where, it's kind of just bring it back to like the clinical studies with mice, where they train dogs or animals or something like that, where they hit a buzzer, it shocks them. Like, okay, don't want to do that. Or they have some reward that they like, and they do it over and over again. But then they have some, I don't know, just wasted ass mice or something. I don't know. But basically, you start seeing some negative effects from amount of use. You start to grasp that, and again, that's a whole like psychology of moderation, where you kind of start testing the dials of like how much am I like willing to put up with? How much am I willing to take? It kind of tells me like how much like I'm willing to like really like am I guilty pleasures or something like that. Usually that refers to TV shows or something, but the idea of like how I want some of this stuff. I would like to enjoy some of this stuff, and it does come with some bad things. Think about it in terms of food or risky activities or something like that. But this is still like a way that I'm still weighing my options here. I feel like with addiction, there is no weighing of the options. So I like the let's see here. Professor L, I don't feel negatively when I don't drink, but when I do drink, I drink a lot. Same man or woman, Professor L. So I've stopped drinking so much. I didn't realize the enter button sent it. Okay. I guess, I don't know if this part is like, if you refer to that you quit drinking entirely, or if you just have stopped drinking as much. But I mean, this is, I don't know, kind of longer with the theme so far of what we've been talking about here is the idea of, and, actually I was about to still plan to, but do a video about, watch, I'm going to spoil the whole thing here, but anyway, who cares? I can always do another thing. But I was going to do a video about the difference between a drinking problem and an alcoholic. Like, I know I recently did one about the different types of alcoholics, but that's still in the realm of alcoholism. Like, there really is like the phrase drinking problem does not, a lot of times it seems synonymous with alcoholism and people use them interchangeably, but there really is like, and I know a good amount of people, some family that have like, I would say a drinking problem, but not alcoholism, to where it like a drinking problem. What I think of is that like your drinking is causing some problems, right? Like you enjoy it so much, or it's just become a habit that you do, or again, you can't moderate as well, or you can't really moderate it at all. You don't always feel compelled to drink, because I've actually met a lot of people like this. You don't always feel compelled to drink. You don't feel like you have to drink a lot or even that often, but when you do, it ignite something to where you can't stop. And usually that's how people define alcoholism. What they'll be like is the inability to stop once you start, right? But no, I do know plenty of people that they just like, because they'll always be like, oh, why did I drink? Like, I knew, I told myself it was going to be different, and it wasn't. And then they'll go months without doing it, without thinking about it. And then they'll kind of, it'll be it's usually, and that's one key part of it, is that usually when they do drink, it's some event. It's actually some external thing that gets them to drink, and not an internal thing like the want to do it, or a way to cope or something like that. So they get lulled into a sense of like, well, I'm going to celebrate this thing, but then they just drink way too much, and be doing stuff when you're super wasted. Usually you're not like learning to split the atom or anything like that. You're just doing not great stuff, texting the ex, making super not cool jokes with your work friends or stuff like that. And then they do that stuff and they're like, crap. But they don't ever think to fully quit, because in some sense they can quit. They can quit unlike what they know or perceive that alcoholics do. Like I said, I know people very close to my life, I know that are like this, where they don't even have a time frame, right? They don't go, I need to quit for 6 months, and they'll celebrate with a drink. No, they just kind of go a long time, and then they go, all right, we'll try this again. Maybe they get ripped up real good, but nothing bad happens. And so they're like, all right, let's go. It's cool again. Tested the waters. Everybody's coast is clear. But then eventually, just because they have that problem with just what their inhibitions are, because drinking is so strange. It affects people like psychologically so different. Like you're happy drunks or angry drunks or something like that. It's all the same chemical. And sometimes you think it's their predisposition, but I know plenty of people that are super nicest people in the world, but when they drink, they just get angry. They get wild. They either just get very intense, maybe not super angry, or very intensely angry. And and so with some of these too, going to that like effect, the way that alcohol affects you, this can also be in the same realm of a drinking problem. Like, one thing that actually I thought was good, but was actually not good, was that I, for the most part, when I did drink socially, I was pretty chill, just cracked some jokes and just hung out, talked with people, listened, all that type of stuff. And then a lot of it was just drinking by myself. But I would put the phone away and I wouldn't ruffle anybody up or need to reach out or start doing some like, ridiculous stuff. And I just kind of kept to myself. Some people are not that way. And once they get drunk, they immediately start just sending out the text, what's up, what's happening, trying to, talk to people on the phone and have long, deep conversations. And, or they get into fights. Maybe you're not an isolated drinker, but so anyways, point being is that sometimes what dictates your level of problem with drinking is the behavior you have when you drink, And so that's why, like I said, why I thought it was a good thing, but it really wasn't, because it kept me drinking for a while. Because if I was like some of the other people I know that when they drink, they get real crazy and real reckless, people would have like started kicking me out of their life. I think some of those harsher consequences would have started coming sooner and sooner. But like I talked about before, maybe it wouldn't have mattered because I wasn't ready. But anyways, so the idea that you have a drinking problem or alcoholism, like I said, a drinking problem to me is your drinking causes problems. It may not have to it may not have to do with how much you drink or how often, rather, like the frequency, but the quantity. When you drink a shitload and stuff be crazy. And actually, maybe it's not even a big deal of how much you drink. People are going to like do a double take, but again, the way you act. But however, all the other sort of markers of alcoholism don't seem to be there. You can pick it up or leave it for months. You don't really you don't feel compelled really when you're going through stress or something. It's not your go-to. You actually like demonstrate that you have other coping skills and things like that. And so there's plenty of people like that, especially like, in certain communities, whether you want to just say America as a whole or certain areas of the country or again, not even maybe the area like geographically, but the social parts of where you're at, where drinking is much more accepted and getting wasted is much more accepted. That it's more accepted. So they put up with like some sort of like, if you have a drinking problem, basically you can kind of get away with it. Like a lot of people in college can like covertly like have alcoholism and maybe people don't know, but a lot of places where you're at, who you're with and whatnot, the drinking problem will not be seen. However, I would contend that, I think I've said contend 4 times now. I would say that alcoholism will always be noticeable. Now, we'll take a pause here. Professor, what I'm understanding here is the act itself may not be the principal issue, but how it affects you and others. Yes, because here's actually this goes right into my next part of that the line of demarcation between the drinking problem and alcoholism is that it is about how it affects you and others. And it is to the point where I would say you could really define alcoholism is that you basically have a drinking problem where your drinking causes problems. However, the problems do not stop it at all, or even a little bit, or maybe they do, but basically the consequences don't do anything to your behavior of drinking. I mean, it can do something to you, like you feel more shameful, or you just it changes the way you think about things, or you feel just shittier and stuff like that. However, it does not. You still drink. Basically, I don't know. That was a little stupidly convoluted way of saying you drink despite the consequences. A person who has a drinking problem, like their drinking causes consequences, it causes issues. But when you start getting into the alcoholic territory, your drinking causes problems and it is not deterring you because you can't stop. And that's kind of like the big issue there, right? Is that even though it is starting to affect you and it's starting to affect others, you can't stop. And again, that's where the weird line with the drinking problem where people are like, I still want to do it, or I'll go back in and test the waters. And maybe maybe you'll just do it once, put it down. Maybe you won't do something as crazy or whatnot. But with alcoholism, when you go back almost all the time. You go back into the way you're drinking. Maybe not initially, but you'll eventually get back to you're doing it up, man. Nobody. I'm a drinking problem. I live a place where drinking is very common. It can skip along for a while. Probably stop me for a while. Yeah, I mean that's in a funny way. If you think about alcoholism or addiction, in a way, consequences do stop us. I suppose you could say. I know that's like completely negating everything I said before, but consequences do, right? Because what I mentioned earlier about the want to drink normally, you actually don't want to drink normal. You want to drink the way you drink, but without consequences. But consequences eventually do get you to stop. But it is because they get you to stop because then it makes you change, and it makes you like seek help, and it makes you do things to where you can change, and it makes you do things that you have to do. It's like physically or psychologically or what have you, to like there is an effort or something has to be put forward to change. I think as you had mentioned that you're a place where drinking is super common, and it's where you live, and other people you can go a while. Maybe there's nothing that really actually makes you change your drinking in a sense. Like, I don't want to put this. The drinking problem, you don't have to like radically change who you are or your behaviors or even be aware of them or do anything like that. It actually can be as simple as like, crap, I gotta stop. I mean, that again, that's one of those big differences, because with alcoholism, there's a lot of times you're like, crap, I gotta stop, or I need to stop, or literally the law is telling me to stop. But you can't just do it though. Like I think one of the things that truly is hard for people to grasp when it comes to alcoholics or addicts is that the consequences can be the impetus for change. It can be what like ignites your change or your journey or your evolution, or at least even if it's temporarily or prolonged or for the rest of your life. It can be the thing that starts it, but it is not the thing that does it. And again, I say this is usually what's very hard for people to grasp, because they'll see, just like, again, like, as I know many people have looked at me, you'll see like all this bad stuff happen where it's not even stuff you're doing to other people, but you'll just be haggard, and people see that you got fired from your job, or you're just alone drinking and they know you are. You just look awful. I remember one time I I was in a grocery store, and luckily I didn't have the alcohol on me yet, because I ran into someone I knew, and someone most people, just about all people in my life, know the deal. They know I'm an alcoholic and an addict. So do not want to run into anybody I know if I ever were to have alcohol. It's just like always like, please don't. But I ran into someone, luckily, quote unquote, before I actually had the bottle in my basket. Because I don't just carry around a bottle in my hand like a caveman carries a club. I am classy, no, but it just, something seems worse about just holding, like walking amongst the public and holding, because I get the handle, like the huge jug, just holding like a giant like bottle of vodka. Like, yeah, I don't know if a basket makes it any better, but it kind of hides it a little bit more. But anyways, I remember I was walking. And so-and-so was like, hey, what's up, man? I was just like, hey, super, what? And I was like, oh God, am I gonna have to change course? Like, I was headed to the alcohol aisle. Now I don't know which route I'm going to take. Hopefully he goes away. All the stuff I'm thinking in my head, and whatever, just like a generic, or I thought just totally generic, whatever conversation. Zeb, how's the wife, kids? You don't have wife, kids? Oh, I thought you were someone else. No, but just whatever, bland, how's the weather sort of conversation, small talk. I talked to the person later, when I met them in much better circumstances. And they were like, I remember this used, and they weren't a very like poetic, descriptive type of person, but I remember they used this word, very specific word. They go, dude, you looked haunted. That was the word he used. Not just like, dude, you had bags under your eyes, or you looked like skinny, but not a good type of skinny, and you looked just pasty white, and you looked unkempt, and you just had a beard that was growing like the grass of a dead homeowner, like on the lawn. Okay, now that was being stupidly poetic, but point being, I was like, I just remember him. He's a person that not put things so beautifully. Actually, I mean, beautifully correct was he's like, you just look haunted, and so when you come across things like that, and if you have a like if you're in, kind of going back to what this was, I'm around a lot of people that were drinking is very common, and it's commonplace to do it. um you could be in some places where it's commonplace to drink and stuff, but what I would say is different is that if you're in a place where it's common to get drunk, and I would say that there's a very big difference between that, because I know, like, gatherings with other families of friends and stuff like that. I even remember back when I was younger, there was a lot of times I just saw people having beers. People just bring out the cooler, whether it was for the big football game coming up, or whether it was a graduation, or whether it was, somebody's birthday and they just decided to throw a big shindig or whatnot. And I remember with some circles I was in. Again, I remember this when I was little. Is that I would see beers a lot. I remember always seeing like the Busch Light can in a lot of people's hands. I guess that was the drink of choice from that sort of social circle. But it was different when I remember I got older and I like hung around one of my friends' family, and it was different because there wasn't just lots of beers and lots of like seeing just like the sips of drinking. There was a lot of drunk people. And that is I would say is a very big difference, because I know there's maybe a lot of cultures, maybe a lot of social circles and stuff like that where drinking is common. It's kind of like what they say in Europe, where like the younger kids, yeah, or younger teens or whatnot, they're exposed to wine or beer, or like, in Germany, like a stout, or that's how little I know about that stuff. Again, cheap vodka drinker, but they're more exposed to stuff like that. And so they, but that could be drinking. But it is different when when you're constantly exposed, as reading this comment here, where you're around drunk people a lot. And the act of getting drunk is super normalized. Like you put that it's common to get drunk where I live, extremely common. Drunk people everywhere, it seems like, right? Like this is something you could look at kind of like I remember like living in the cheaper housing neighborhoods right next to the big state college and stuff like that, where just, again, it was maybe you wouldn't see people just like on patio chairs, lawn chairs and stuff, just drinking beers on the weekends throughout the day or stuff like that. Like you maybe wouldn't see people a lot, but at night you would see like the Walking Dead, super drunk people walking home, people passing out in yards. Like that sort of crazy behavior was normalized. That's why it's known as some of the crazier times. So that's why, as I said earlier, like you can kind of like covertly get away with your alcoholism for a little bit, because it's not just that drinking is common. It is that getting drunk and getting wasted is common. And like I've seen this a lot through, again, the way people handle things differently. Like a lot of times there was a time where I thought, yeah, just at every wake, for someone that passed, people be getting wasted. People be hitting up, you meet at a bar afterwards, plenty of time. People get wasted. And then I've been around some, and this was not people like in recovery or anything like that. This was just like another, it was a coworker friend that had died, and it was just his family. I was holding stuff and stuff. And man, it would have been mortifying, and they might have even kicked you out, or maybe not kicked you out, but it would have been mortifying if you were going to be like getting drunk. And again, the person didn't die for alcohol related reasons or just anything like that, but they were just like, no, this is like a celebration of life. You're not cracking beers and like taking nips from the bottle of Fireball at a fucking celebration of life. Or what are you, insane? To which some people I know would go, you're not drinking at this thing? What are you, insane? Like, it's just people's responses to things are a lot different. Like, I can't tell you, oh, this is like a much darker thing, but I can't tell you how many times people, like you talked about that one was not alcohol related. I have been to one that was alcohol related. Unfortunately, I know quite a few people that have died from things that happened while they were drinking, or just their alcoholism in general, just the way it affected their health, or because they were drinking every day and driving every day, they killed themselves, or because they were in the middle of their alcoholism, they committed suicide. Lots of dark stuff. And a lot of times people would be getting wasted at those celebrations of life, at those wakes and stuff like that. And you would think like, man, isn't like the cognitive dissonance like knocking like, hey, what are we doing here? This person died for this very thing that you're doing right now. But a lot of people it's just like, I know it may seem ironic or it may seem embarrassing or it may seem cruel, like to do this in front of like someone whose like life had ended because of this thing, but that's just the way we do things. And truly, not even saying it like, look at these ignorant idiots. Like, no, I mean, that's the way we do things. Like, it's a celebration of life. We celebrate with drinking. And this is not like just, I'm talking about a whole entire generation or a whole family or a whole community of alcoholics. Some places are just kind of like that. There is probably more alcoholics in these types than others, but it doesn't always mean they are alcoholics. But it's just kind of amazing that it can be around you so much and how that affects what you think about your own alcoholism or even your own addiction. Like, getting into the drug parlor for my drug addicts out there. I remember like that some people would like the talk, like in middle school or something like that, the talk of cocaine was like, whoa, you got coke? I only see that in like movies and stuff. And the idea of like smoking weed and in some places it was like, whoa, you got the drugs? Are you guys gonna do pot? Like, just the fact that, I mean, from where I lived, just the fact that like somebody knew a drug dealer, right? Like you had access to a drug dealer to acquire the drugs, but they're like, yeah, he's a pot dealer guy. That's just what Jeff does. I don't know. He didn't want to work in like, he gave up on being an electrician, so he sells pot now. I don't know. He's a weird uncle of one of our friends. But then some people are just like, whoa, like I said, and they could even be the drinkers group. But it just, you see people around you and it just becomes more commonplace. It's always funny that I think this way, that the addiction and alcoholism becomes such an isolated experience. Like it usually, maybe, I don't know, maybe you're the bar alcoholic and stuff like that. Maybe you're running around in circles of the same people doing drugs because you have the same common goal or whatnot. But a lot of times it becomes this isolated experience, and you think of it as the way that you became an alcoholic or an addict, which is in some sense obviously is true. However, what's weird to think about is that this is learned behavior. Like it really is. Like it's you actually need like other people to embark on this journey. Like going back to like the people I knew where drugs were a little bit more chill or whatever you want to call it. You would have to know a drug dealer. You have to know someone you could get weed from or mushrooms, or if you wanted to do coke for the 21st birthday, something wild or something like that. Never really done it before, whatever. But someone to do that. And you can watch all the TV shows and movies you want, but I guarantee out there that there was somebody, guarantee it, I don't know, but I would put money on it that there was somebody who taught you how to smoke weed the first time. Like I remember that someone had to teach me how to smoke cigarettes. I remember just seeing cigarettes in movies. I was just like, and I realized I wasn't inhaling. I was like, inhale. I was like, I am. Didn't you see the smoke come in and go out? And they're like, no, inhale. And then I coughed for 40 days straight. but the same thing with weed. Somebody taught you, I don't know, you made like a little weed pipe out of it, like an apple or something like that. But the same thing, even like doing intravenous drugs, like how to acquire drugs, like, or how to do all the little sneaky, crafty ways or the scheming to get money to get drugs or anything like that. Like a lot of it is, you may have set off on your own course, but a lot of it is stuff that is learned from other people. It learned from your environment. Learn how to be sometimes, or you learn. I remember this was back in the day, like the early internet. They had like Erowid.com where it had all these drug experiences and stuff like that, and all these message boards. Imagine just like a Reddit that was just for drug use, and you'd learn. You just like, I don't know, like Booby Lover 420 on the message board would just tell you a way that you can like make this new weed or something like that. Because I have a doctorate in herbology or something like that. It's like, sure you do, buddy. But it's stuff that you learn to do from other people. And a lot of times you're like, okay, well, yeah, you're like, drugs are not ubiquitous the way they are. And like, you have to learn how to kind of shoot up, right? It has such a process of melting it down and like using a syringe or learning how to like weed, smoke weed, or learning how where to get it from, all that type of stuff. Needing someone to get it from that, um, but it's the same thing with drinking. It maybe in more indirect ways too, but um, yeah, somebody said learn how to drink all day, any day from my city. Um, and then Ron said, "My buddies had to light the lighter on the bong the first few times." Oh, for sure. I remember I murphed it, which immediately I did something that had a new word that I never heard of. I guess that's when you smoke it, and but then you cough into it, and it like shoots the bong water back up, and just it's like, dude, you murphed it. And I remember I was coughing, but also laughing because I don't know. I thought the word murph was really funny. I didn't know idea what it meant. They were actually mad. Again, communal around people, but with drinking, it works a lot of the same way. And it's just like, well, it's drinking. You drink water, you drink soda. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you don't need somebody to know how to do that. But in some ways, you do. Like, and I don't know, maybe you had the morally questionable uncle who let you have beers, or your own dad, or the friends you stole alcohol from your parents, or they're all wasted after the, I don't know, the Fourth of July party or the wake or something, and that's when you snuck in the drinks, unfinished drinks, all this type of stuff. But you did it in this sort of community and stuff. Like it would be. I think it's incredibly rare for somebody for their first time to drink to do it by themselves. To just be like, okay, we're doing this thing. Maybe you try to sip a beer and stuff like that. Like, oh, no one's looking. I just want to see what all this is about. But again, it comes from that thing to like see what all this is about because you've seen other people do it. And again, I can't stress this enough. The difference between just seeing the act of drinking or to see drunk people all the time, to just get used to like some of your uncles and aunts, or yeah, if the grill's out, they're gonna be wasted by like when 10 o'clock rolls around. Like every time we get together and we go to the football game or the big baseball team, or we go out like whatever, like you're drinking during that. And again, not just drinking, but you're getting drunk, and so like it's I don't know. It does change your approach. It changes the ways that you think about it. I think it also changes what you think you can get away with. Um, and I don't mean get away with like I can hide my alcoholism better, but also get away with in the sense of maybe I can go back to this type of drinker. I see all these people in my lives that are this type of drinker. They just drink on the weekends. They get drunk on the weekends. I want to get drunk, man. I know it's like, really screwing up my life, but I'll just be like them. I see them do it all the time. And not just like I'm aware that people in the world do this, but I see it. There's a huge difference. There's a huge difference between knowing something is occurring in your life, in the world, and actually seeing it. Like, and one of the things I would connect this to about that huge difference is that so many people, it's funny, so many people think that they're so alone in their addiction. Like, and I felt that way too, especially, in my alcoholism, drinking by myself. I felt like I was like, I know as dumb as it sounds, and as like self-centered as it sounds, like, man, I'm the only person who's going through this. Like, I was consciously aware that alcoholics existed, and I'd seen other dudes that were buying pints of vodka in the morning, just like me. It's like, what up, dude? Your life sucks. Same here. But it still felt so alone because all the stuff I did was alone. All the little sneaking and stuff too, the hiding of the booze, or dude, I'll tell you, especially like being on drugs and just having to be like, I'm normal, and having no one else. Like, you may have memories when you're younger, when you're just like, dude, you smoke weed with your friend and you go to class, or you might be around their parents or like someone else or the cop or something. They're like, dude, we gotta act normal. And then you probably totally do not act normal, but then they don't care. But then you're laughing about it later or something like that. But no, this isn't any of that. This is just all on your own, just stuck in your own brain. And you don't see any, again, you could be aware of it. Maybe you watch the show Intervention. You're just like, oh crap, that's awful. Like, again, if you relate too much to the person in Intervention, usually not a good sign, which I did. But it is a different thing to kind of just know it's out there and it exists. But maybe to not see one that's like you, which is very important, because in your mind, and this goes back to about ways that you could be in denial about drinking, is you're like, well, I got a problem of some sort, but I'm not an alcoholic because the homeless guy out there is the alcoholic. the dude that's drinking Everclear, and he's buying it with change that he had to beg for and stuff like that, and he's unkempt and dirty. He's in and out of homeless shelters and stuff like that. I mean, that's alcoholic. I'm some other classified thing, an alcoholic, but that's person. But again, going back to how lonely it can feel is that no one's quite, or it feels like no one's quite living the life that you're living, because you're not just a person that is, a homeless, like transient, you're on your own type of person. You're doing all this stuff, all this sneaky stuff and all this guilt-ridden stuff when you have a family, when you have friends or people that care about you or that are worried about you, or you have to hide it from them. Maybe they're not, but it's because you're hiding it from them, and you're doing, again, all this sneaky, and all this lying and all this type of stuff like that. And you're like, man, no one else just does what I'm doing. I'm such a piece of shit. I'm the only person that's a piece of shit that's like this. Again, a lot of people think that. Again, it sounds crazy because, like, that's not true. There's other people out there, but it just feels like that. And it feels like that because you don't bear witness to anybody else doing that. Like, you're not seeing other people doing that around you. Because, again, it's most alcoholics and addicts are doing shit in really solitary actions. And they're always going home by themselves or doing stuff alone, or they're sneaking to not have other people see it. So you don't see other people doing it. And in the same way that you see other people that are drinking or using drugs, like it's one of those things where, let's say you're in a high school class, right? I read this crazy stat about Russia. It was like in some parts of Russia, like it was like parts that have decent populations, it's like 1 out of every 5 males had reported that they had done like opiates or heroin intravenously, like at least once a week, which usually if you're doing it at least once a week, you're an addict, I would say. And I think about that. I'm like, man, that's insane to think that like 1/5 of the boys like if I went to high school, 1/5 of the dudes out here are heroin addicts. That would be nuts. Like, right? Because think how different that would change things. Like, think how much, like, how many more behaviors that seemed crazy would just seem kind of commonplace. Like, just seem kind of like, yeah, they're shooting up, they're taking long bathroom breaks, or in between gym or lunch, they're skipping lunch because they're going. And that's the thing. The craziness then almost gets dialed down a little bit, because here's the thing: you could think heroin's the craziest thing in the world, but in your life, if half the people half of your friends do it, is it really that like crazy? Like, truthfully, like, I mean, it could be, but it changes it, because again, a lot of the stuff that we learn that is normal, a lot of the stuff that we learn that is acceptable or bad or good, we just learn it based on others. And again, not others in this grand wider sense, but the ones that are close to us. If you think about it, a lot of times we think the ocean is our fishbowl. So basically you see what's around you and you're like, yeah, this is here. This is the ocean, because it's water and just, I mean, you probably get the analogy, right? And you don't realize, because you can't, a fishbowl in the ocean, you're not going to see the ocean. You're just going to see, all you can see is just what's around you. That's all. You don't have the brain capacity to like take into consideration stats about people, what averages are, or what, like, well, I mean, I see like half my family doing this stuff, and I see half my friends doing this stuff. But according to this research study, this 1 million people were given this questionnaire, they are abnormal. So I will now totally understand it that way. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. Oh yeah, let's see here. I was seeing people also being drunk buttheads. Language. No, I was also seeing people being drunk buttheads like I was being, but I didn't want to be around those people. It's still lonely. I wasn't connecting. That's one of the one of the really eye-opening experiences for me. During the times when I was sober, sober for longer amounts of time, so I would feel safe enough to go out with people. If it happened to be, I would never just go to a bar unless there was some like reason where I really needed to go to make an appearance, I would go in there, drop in, and then drop out. But some of the times, I'd just be at like a bar and grill or some place, or again, an event or stuff where people are drinking, and seeing other people be the drunk bedheads was very eye-opening to me, because it was just like, man, when you are around a bunch of drunk people and you are not on their wavelength, they're fucking annoying. Like, oh my God, they drive me. I tell you what, like sometimes, like, to not be triggered or to not put myself in a harmful situation, like if I feel vulnerable or something, or if I don't feel quite as strong in my sobriety or anything like that, the reason why I would avoid being around drunk people is not because of the aesthetics, not because I'm watching people drinking, not because I'm like maybe smelling it or seeing the action of it. No. The main reason I would not go is that being around drunk people is stressful. Like I said, annoying, but it's also stressful. Drunk people are drunk people. They're super unpredictable. They're super loud. They're super grating, like the way they repeat stuff and all this type of, and it's just like, it's just hard to be, again, if you're not on that wavelength, if you're on the wavelength, you're speaking their language, right? But if you're not, it's affecting. It's affecting. And here's the thing though, the eye-opening experience is like, hey buddy, you were doing that. You were getting drunk. How do you think you acted? What, you think you're like this magnificent person who's like, and now I may have had a higher tolerance, so I wouldn't act the way they were acting with the amount that they drank, but I wouldn't drink the amount that they drink. I drank the amount that I drank. And it would give me this idea that, man, I was acting like this. I know I was. Maybe I wasn't the angry drunk, right? Maybe I wasn't super crazy, talkative, like to the point of annoying people, but I know I did annoying things. I always like to think I didn't. I always like to think I handled my alcohol, but I know that's not true, because there was nights I blacked out. And so it's like, what? You don't even remember it. You're going to know how you acted. But again, it kind of goes back to that atmosphere you have. Kind of one of the themes that we've been touching on for the last little bit here is that the atmosphere you have is that if you're around people that get drunk all the time, or they're kind of just like, that's just the way it goes, or they just kind of make fun of you and do those stupid, they don't ever go like, hey man, I don't know if I want to be around you this much. Like if you're going to be drinking like that, you're annoying to be around, and you worry me, and you're stressful, and I don't want to do it. And like, it's sometimes things that happen like that make you go, like, it's not just the hangovers you have or the trouble at work you get in, or the super like just shitty kind of days and all that type of stuff. Sometimes what opens your eyes is just like somebody seemingly out of the blue, at least to you, they just come out and be like, I don't know if I want to be around you as much. Maybe they don't tell you, but you feel them pull away. And that's noticeable, like in a sense, because sometimes with your family, or maybe your significant other, or definitely, with your kids, they kind of have to be around you in some sense. Maybe not always, obviously, but in some sense, they're more compelled to be around you, or they're more obligated to, whatever sort of structure in your life that is. But a lot of times friends can, or again, just the people around you can open your eyes to things, because they don't have to be. And they're weirdly, at least in some respects, they're a good judge of character in ways that maybe your loved ones can't be, because they don't have any bias. And they don't, and maybe like, this is maybe not a friend, this is an acquaintance, this is just someone in your life. But they can be truthful, and they can be more honest, because they won't have the consequences. They don't have to see you at Thanksgiving. They don't have to, live with you. They don't, maybe it's just a person that, you did something at like a work party, and, someone comes out and they tell you the next day, like, fuck was that, man? That was an embarrassment. You're like, what? No, it's cool. Me and my friends always do that. They're like, okay, then your friends are psychos that you guys always act like that. That's crazy. And you get this shock to your system where you're like, oh, if I'm just around people that drink all the time and they drink alcoholically, I'm not going to really notice my drinking is out of hand, because there's no contrast to what normalcy is. Or there's like again, going back to that example I used about the celebrations of life, or the wakes, or the funerals, where some people are like, yeah, you drink at these, toast to them, even if they died in a drinking driving accident, even if they died of a long struggle with alcoholism and liver failure and stuff, take a toast. And then some people are just like, if you bring any alcohol to this thing, we are kicking you the fuck out. What are you talking about? You don't drink at these things. You just don't ever know without that contrast. Let's see here. Let me see if I can pull up another. Let's see, there's something juicy here. I don't know how much longer I'm gonna be on here, but I don't know. Might do something a little interesting, something a little neat. Well, I'm not gonna get into spirituality. I don't know if that's a whole. That gets into the whole AA thing and stuff like that. Maybe when I have a more set up one, I can do something like that because I would like feedback on that one. I know I don't have the same school of thought that I know a lot of people, and a lot of people that follow me or like watch my stuff that they may not agree with some of the thoughts I have, but that's okay. I don't know. I guess one thing again, I have to remember. I always forget to remember this that there are people that can watch this later, and that actually I find out do watch this later. Um, and it's funny. What I think is like I will sometimes forget, that what I'm saying is not everybody's experience. It's usually and what I always try. One of the biggest things is that I truly try to avoid saying you a lot. I truly try to avoid like this as a way of giving advice in some sense. And if I do, it's what I want to say worked for like just a lot of people who follow the same patterns as the ones that I bring up, which are usually my patterns because I know those the best. I know that I've seen a lot of sometimes in the comments, people have different ideas about addiction or the way it functions in people's lives, or the way one of the biggest things is, or the way that you tackle it. In fact, I think we'll just get into this because I've alluded to it enough now. That one of the biggest things there's smart recovery because I talk about like recovery circles a lot in the recovery community, and probably the one that is going to come to mind immediately because it's like not only the biggest one, but it's like the biggest one by far is the 12-step programs. So you're talking about Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, whatever anonymous. And I just saw multiple viewers drop off. They probably don't want me to get into this stuff. That's fine. But it's usually one of the main ones. There's some other ancillary, and I say ancillary because they're usually not on the cusp of things. Like, for instance, one thing I can't stress enough is that I live in Omaha, Nebraska. I know it's a mountain cowpoke town, cowboy town. I don't know why they call them cowboys. Cowboys ride horses, not cows. Anyways, but it's a good sized city. It's a 41st in the country, baby. And so it's my point being is it's not a metropolis, but it's a good sized city. And when it comes to other recovery things, there are some, but man, they are few and far between. I think there's now like 400 or 500 AA meetings, AA meetings alone. That's not even Narcotics Anonymous meetings, right? And so when we're talking the smart recovery, that's another one people bring up a lot, or celebrate, or Dharma recovery, which I also do. There's like this for smart in Omaha. There's like 3 a week, and so if you happen to work during those times, or if you're busy, if you have some other obligation during those times, like I guess you're not doing smart recovery in Omaha. Now there's always Zoom. Zoom is always a thing, but I don't even know to get into that, like as far as Zoom goes, because a lot of people have problems with it. It's not even, it's the same problem that everybody has problems with Zoom in a sense. And it's not this, it's not like, to be, it's good for me to yammer in front of this laptop, but like, as far as like connecting with people and talking with people, everything's sort of delayed. I remember like at work, when I have work meetings, I try to be really nice. So if somebody, had the will and the spunk enough to make a joke during a work meeting, I would want to give them a response, because that's one thing is it's hard to make jokes during a Zoom thing because you won't hear anybody's laughter. So it's just like crickets. And so, but I'm not going to turn on my thing and just go, ha, 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 and turn it off. So I probably looked like a fucking psycho when I did this, but I would go to make it look like I was laughing. I don't think I'd do it that fake or that. It's so weird. Anyways, so there's plenty of stuff with Zoom. Is this the woo-woo part? Will there be crystals? There will not be crystals. Not crystal meth and not crystal. Hey, Calden James, hello from Australia. What time? Actually, I shouldn't ask you that. I can figure out what time it is on my world clock phone. It's probably just stupid. You're like, probably everyone asked me that from world clock. All right. World clock. Yeah, that's Cape Town. Almost there. Sydney, 1:15 p.m. Probably tomorrow. Hello from the future. Or no, you're from the future, right? Right? Never knew how that worked with time zone. I always felt like if there's a way to time travel, wouldn't that be part of it, right? Like it's always weird to me. This is gonna be maybe showing I'm really stupid. Hello from the past. Oh, you're from the past, dude. You're not even gonna know what's about to happen, man. There's stuff going down. Like the spoilers for today, right? I don't know. I always feel very silly because I still do not totally know how time zones work. I understand why they're different, but I always meant like when the way you would watch things, like why people would know, like why you couldn't spoil like sporting events, or like I remember I used to think like why can't you bet on, like why is there sports betting? Because wouldn't somebody know what the score is? Like, okay, not getting into this. Jesus. Oh yes. So don't know what the woo woos. Not gonna be crystals. Not gonna be crystal meth. No, no. You know what? Nothing if you do enjoy crystals or whatever. You know, whatever floats your boat, whatever it makes you feel grounded spiritually and stuff like that. So I mean, that's a good segue, and it's barely a segue, but getting into the idea of the different recovery programs and more so the topic, the controversial topic, which some people, I don't know how they feel about it, but the idea of harm reduction. I mean, I do like smart recovery. If you don't know what that is, that's it's a recovery program that's based on cognitive behavioral therapy, which is very, very, very good for therapy. It's one of like the main sort of epistemologies of how to do like psychotherapy. It's been proven to be effective a lot. There's not one thing that's proven to be the best of them all, but it's proven to be effective a lot. So they're like, well, this crap works for those minds. Let's see if it'll work for these crazy ass minds. And so there's a lot of good stuff in there. And a lot, like I try to do recovery sometimes, like a la carte. Like I go to AA, I go to Dharma Recovery, which is one that's based in a recovery program based on Buddhist principles. And then I go to a meeting that's just kind of like totally secular, not secular in a religious sense, but like it's not really connected to a program. It's just like a get together with people within this local recovery community, and we just kind of check in and talk with each other, right? And so it's just like a mini group therapy. And so I try to do things a la carte, and there's good stuff to be really, and a lot of times too, you find that the foundational elements of these recovery programs are a lot of times based in the same stuff. You know, be honest, think about yourself less, do things that involves yourself less, whether it's either think about yourself less and doing things for others, just like consider your life, consider your actions, considering what you're doing, consider what you're thinking and like how you go about things. And, and again, not just the actions related to the drinking or using, but how you interact with the world. Stuff like that, behavioral patterns, what incites you in something way, that could be like triggers or stuff. So anyways, one of the, but man, when anybody talks about it, at least the people I know, when I talk to people in person and, when anybody, like when the smart meeting's brought up and like where I live, it's just like the same thing is always said, where it's like, oh, is that the one where you can do a little bit of drugs? Is that the one where you can drink a little? Because there is this, it is, I think, I don't know, in the smart recovery, like textbook, like it's a lot of pages, it's over 100 pages. And it's just a small part is about this, but man, this small part bugs a lot of people. And it understandably so in some sense. And it's harm reduction, where it is, and harm reduction means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Sometimes harm reduction is like a social approach. Like when they have in some cities, they have like clean clinics for injection sites, like where they hand out clean needles. And sometimes they basically, they help people do drugs safely. And sometimes the schools of thought is just like, it's safer, but it also gets people, because we offer other services. We offer social services. We just check in with their health. So maybe like, they're not living particularly well. So they could have some underlying health thing that could kill them any moment. Maybe not any moment, but it is like they need to address. And this is the way that because if you just say no, 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 it drives people away and it drives people to do riskier things and, blah, blah, blah. That's more of like a social, that's like a policy type approach. But like harm reduction on the personal level is that, some people are just like, hey, isn't it just moderation? Because what it says is that you do, again, well, two sort of sides to it. One is that you do a lesser thing. So I know a very, very personal example of this in my life. A good friend that I knew for a long time who went back in my opiate days, back in high school and all that stuff. You don't know like anything about me and about my story. Actually, I originally I drank and smoked weed at a super early age, but my addiction really started with opiates when I was like 15. But then that was a small part of my life, and I was like, thank God that whole thing's over. It's like, no, 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 no. Drinking is going to be the main event, and we were just getting started. Anyways, but I have a friend during that time, and he continued to use opiates for a while because I went to a treatment when I was 19, and I was like, we're getting past that, blah, blah, blah. But he continued to use them, and it started getting dangerous. And this was this weird time. I could see in my own life a lot of the people I know that used opiates that the introduction of fentanyl it was weird because like people were struggling and some had died, but then you could see like the rate of like deaths just spike with the rate of fentanyl becoming introduced. And a lot of my friends who had been, or just past people I knew, some not friends, just people I knew in the same circles and stuff like that. Again, we talk about community. They all started dying. The more and more fentanyl became used. But so he had a kid, and he kind of just was like he needed help. They needed help raising like any kid, I guess, but like particularly the person he had it with, he needed to step up in some sort of way. I guess you could say about anybody struggling with addiction, but I don't know. For some whatever reason, there was just like this intersection where it was like needed more. Right? Like it was like it became less about him and more about the child. And so he did not quit cold turkey or do complete abstinence. He just started smoking weed, and would be the California sober dude. Um, and he's like, you know what? I know I'm like dependent on it, but it gives me kind of just enough what I need. But that's the thing, though, right? I mean, that's why when I was joking about moderation, but this isn't quite moderation because it's not really. He has total dependency on weed. He does need it to get through the day, and it probably his number one coping skill. Like again, a lot of stuff is not great. And mind you, this wasn't some trial run. He's been now doing this for years and years and years. And the crazy thing is that it helped in some way. It helped him stabilize enough to where because he was overdosing and stuff like that, getting Narcan back to life. And so it stabilized him enough to where he could work a regular job and, kind of be there financially. And again, I know there's probably so many arguments in people's minds about like, well, he wasn't really truly present if he was high all the time, even if he was with his kid, but like he was there. I mean, you could say he's doing the bare minimum, but it was better than nothing. And so, the kind of just watching from afar, very few times of contact with him. It's like, hey, what's up? Don't know if he'll ever step down from that. But that would be one aspect of harm reduction. One aspect of it, I guess you could say, one function of it is harm reduction, where totally dependent, is not using it in a moderate way, but it's a lesser substance, or the way it's being like, again, the dependency is still there, and you're not using it medicinally, and you're not using it occasionally, you're not using it to celebrate stuff. You're kind of still using it in all the same ways that an addict would use it. Again, a way to quote unquote enjoy life, or to put up with life, or to function, and a lot of people would argue, well, no, because you know what? Like I said at the very beginning of this, talking about consequences and how sometimes they can propel you into, starting that change. Well, it's like, well, now that he's doing this has only delayed him getting the change that he needs to be completely abstinent, to actually turn his life around and all this type of stuff. And some people would argue, I don't know if he was going to make it. Because the truth is, a very harsh truth, is that a lot of people don't. You talk about like, well, he needed to feel those consequences. He needed to feel all of them to like finally be able to change. It's like some people don't make it past the consequences. Some consequences are forever. And so in this case, I mean, you can never compare a future that you never saw play out. So in this case, smoking weed seemed to be super helpful because it kept him from death's door, and he was able to just participate in his son's life, and who knows? I mean, and then now you could say, well, now maybe you could try to step down from it. I don't know quite sure how he's doing at the moment, but again, he's been like, this isn't something he did over a summer. He's been doing this, like the California sober, the weed, and I don't even know if California sober is supposed to be like just weed occasionally, but he's been doing this for a long time, and it's just kind of the way he is. Then you have harm reduction that is just, I guess, it's just doing less. And I guess it's still this idea that you may be dependent on it, but it's all going back to like the very first comment, like that, just have one beer a day, except maybe it's like a 6-pack a day or something like that. I guess, I don't know why I started this whole thing. Point is that a lot of people think it's very, like, they think that's insane. They think that's an insane idea. And so they throw everything out with it. Like, smart recovery is stupid. And no, I'm not going to pay attention to any of it, which kind of sucks because there's a lot of good stuff in there. There's a lot of ideas about, distorted cognitions and stuff like that alcoholics and addicts face that exacerbate their addiction. And there's one other thing. There are two things. There's harm reduction, and then there is the other thing that in smart recovery, your journey does actually end. You get to a point where you've completed this full transformation, and then you don't need the continual maintenance that 12-step recovery suggests that you do, to be a lifer in this stuff, to continually do this stuff. And some people are like, that's stupid. But again, then they throw the whole thing out, and they're like, okay, if it believes that, then it's all nonsense, which I don't know. I don't know where I was. There was something I was going with this, but I don't know. It's been an hour and a half. Super appreciated all the people that are live and all the comments and stuff like that. Again, they're good to go off of. Again, I don't know if this was maybe too late of a time or whatnot. I don't know if I need to give better warning. Like I said, I've never made a post before where it's just like, oh, it's just like a post on Facebook. Who knows? Maybe a short that would be more noticeable or something. Or maybe people just didn't feel like it. It's Monday night. I'm tired. I don't want to listen to you. I don't know. Anyways, I'm super appreciative of everybody out there though that watched this and that will watch this, in the future. Planning to do one soon. We'll give a good notice of it. Yes, thank you, nobody, and enjoy the past. Australia person. I don't know if you care if I say your name or not, but enjoy the past. No crystals. And yeah, I guess that's it.